Selecting a mentor seemed really scary at first because you have to go through this process of approaching somebody that you kind of like really respect in the department and ask them to like work with you. But I had actually taken a class with Roger, and I quickly realized that our interests aligned in a lot of ways, and I was like really eager to start working with him. And I'd also heard from other students in the department that he's a real advocate for student needs, and I was like, this is great. Like, he's very organized and enthusiastic, and he shares my interests. So I was like, this is a great combination of traits that I would want in somebody to work with. So yeah, I think that it was easy for me after finding somebody whose like work style really meshed with my own.
I think what's more important to me is knowing that the person that I'm working with, and I do kind of see the mentor-mentee relationship at the graduate level as being more of a working relationship, because I'm not there like to make them do their work. I want somebody who is sort of self-motivated and may not have a clear idea of what they want to do per se, but has interests and is passionate about them and is curious about the world. And so all of those things Jordan had, and I think when looking at somebody and thinking about what it is that is actually really important to me, it's actually getting the deadlines right, making the deadlines, and knowing that when you make a certain commitment to work with somebody, that means something. And so all of those things Jordan has, and so it's been great to work with her.
Yeah, so I'm somebody who's like crazy organized, and some people think that it's a little bit weird, but so since I study like digital technology, maybe it's a little bit bizarre for me to be so what's the word I'm looking for? I'm kind of like addicted to my paper planner. Like, I need it to survive. And so whenever I get some sort of deadline or anything, it goes right in my planner, and I'm balancing like a lot of activities at the same time, and lots of different deadlines, just like every other grad student. So anytime I need to do something, it goes in my planner, and that's kind of like the thing that decides my life for me. And so that having a planner and also like planning out those deadlines in advance with your mentor is really important, I think. So in our first couple of meetings, Roger and I he just sat down and he was like, okay, well, let's plan our meetings for the rest of the year in our like first meeting. And I was like, yes, this is perfect. This is exactly what I need. And so we did. We like one meeting every like 3 weeks or something for the rest of the year. And then we like on our first meeting, we decided when I was going to defend and all this great stuff. And so I've been able to keep those dates in mind as I'm making progress toward things. Even if my plans change a little bit, I still have these deadlines that keep me on track.
I've become kind of obsessed with planning, and it's because I had quite a bit of. It wasn't a big failure when I was doing my dissertation, but I did my comps, passed them successfully, and prior to this, I had been organized like any student, but not really. I relied a lot on my own sort of interest in the subject in order to finish my work, and also this sort of semester structure I was really good at. So I could always get the reading done for the weekly meeting, and I could always get the seminar paper done. Once it came to the dissertation, though, I sort of stopped and kind of freaked out for about a year. Like I graduated a year later than I should have because I didn't. Number one, I didn't really know how to deal with a big project like that, and number two, I believed in scholarship. I saw myself as a scholar, but I also didn't really take a lot of it totally seriously. On the other hand. And so after about a year, I went to my advisor and I said, I need to do something. This isn't getting done. I hadn't had even one chapter completed at that time. And he said, oh, okay, so when do you want to graduate? And so we laid it out that way. And I think subsequently I learned that from that experience that things don't get done unless I take a sort of active role in making sure that they get done. And so it sort of flipped me into becoming a kind of crazy type A personality that uses, very specific. I want to know when you're going to get it done. I want to know what it is you're going to give me. I want to have all those things set down. And it is a little obsessive. I think there's a sort of element of it that is obsessive, but in order to actually complete the stuff that you need to complete, which is substantial, I think, both at the master and the PhD level, you have to have a certain level of organization and a certain dedication to making those deadlines. So. Students are in a variety of places when I work with them, and some of them, like Jordan, I don't have to do a lot with. Like I set out the structure, they go for it. There are other students though sometimes, and it could be for a variety of reasons. They could be like me, sort of a student who doesn't take it totally seriously, or they could have a lot of issues that from their own past that have contributed to not being able to remain on task. So it could be any number of things. And I often find that sometimes with students, I have to reach out to them and to let them know that their work is valuable to me, but also to let them know that I'm not going to put up with them not completing things on time. And I think both of those things, just being very clear about that, being very clear about my expectations, and also kind of giving students a sense that they matter, are all very important things to me. So that's how I try to ensure it. It doesn't always work, but one of the things that I think I learned as a graduate student, and I think it was because sometimes my advisors weren't as attentive to my needs as they should have been. They were off doing their own work and stuff like that. Which whatever, we are all busy people, but at some point it would have been nice for them to say, hey, is something going on with you? Is there something I can do to help you out? And so if that ever happens in a moment, I try to make sure that I at least try to connect with them on a certain level.
So the first maybe 2 or 3 meetings that I had with Roger, we were just kind of like figuring out what I wanted to do. And I knew that I wanted to emphasize, like certain theories or frameworks in my thesis projects, but I wasn't exactly sure what form I wanted those to take. And so those first few meetings were really just about us like laying out my options, figuring out what like course of action would work best for me and my needs as not only as like a master's student, but also somebody who would be on the job market eventually. So it was important for us to keep that in mind when we were developing my plan. And I think at those stages, it was really important for us to be like flexible to an extent, but then like once we decided on something to be like, okay, this is what we're doing and this is the plan we're sticking to, and here are all the steps that we need to take to complete that plan.
Yeah, I think what you said is really important. The sense of when you're starting a project, there's so much you don't know about it. You may have vague understandings of kind of what you want to do, and often I know when I start a project, it's because I want to emulate something that I've seen that is really cool. But that's not really a project. You have to take it a step further. So just what you were saying, I think it's really important to kind of take a moment to kind of consider your options, but then make a certain commitment to something. And then also realize that, the work you're doing here is not the end all be all of your life, right? Like when you'll finish this project, move on to something else. And this may inform what you do later, certainly, but it's not going to be the only thing that you do.
So my planner is like a big part of my success, I think, as a student. But I also have developed a system where I have short-term to-do list and a long-term to-do list, and those things really help me prioritize things that I need to get done within the next like couple of weeks and things that I can put off for like a month or two. And there's been things on my long-term to-do list that have been on there for like 4 or 5 months that might still be on there next year. And that's okay because they're on my long-term to-do list and they don't have a deadline really. My short-term to-do list, I try to clear it out every week. And having that in mind and having like a sort of like a delineated set of actions of things that I need to do, and it's like on paper right there for me to see really helps keep me on track, especially as when I was a TA, I had like specific days set aside where I would lesson plan and grade, and then like other days set aside where I would do homework for classes. And now that I'm a GA, that's shifted slightly, but it's basically the same system. And then throughout my whole graduate career so far, Sundays have always been my catch-up day. And it's nice to have something like built into my schedule that I take that time off of work. I never schedule meetings on Sundays or gatherings of any kind. Sunday is my day to like kind of reset and like prepare for the next week. And that's usually when I end up getting a lot of those things crossed off my to-do list.
This is why Jordan's amazing, right? I'm like, oh my gosh, I wish I had a sort of organizational structure like she does. But I think, what's really interesting, the thing that I kept thinking while Jordan was talking about this question of balancing your teaching responsibilities or your GA responsibilities and your research, is that it's often something that you're negotiating with over long periods of time too. So I'm currently pre-tenure, about to go up for tenure, and notice that when I first got here, there's a big focus on sort of jump-starting my research program so that I could make sure that I had the right amount of work completed for when I go up for tenure. And so I noticed that in those moments, in those first few years, I didn't focus on teaching as much as research. I kind of emphasized it a little less in terms of the work that I did every week. But now I'm knowing now that I've gotten a good bit of research out, I'm sort of refocusing on my teaching, and so it's kind of interesting to see. Jordan sort of developing the system and then sort of comparing it with my own sort of experience as a faculty member and as somebody who's worked with that balance before. I think it's something that certainly you have to figure out the kind of things that you want to accomplish at this point in your life, and approach it from that perspective. Okay, so one thing is that never works out for me. So I will just say that up front. The other side of this is that I've had people that it works out for. So I think it's a good thing to try. I think the problem with the contemporary university system is that so much of it is based upon trying to get. No one in particular does this. We kind of all do this, but it relies a lot on unpaid and underpaid labor. And this could be either on the level of adjuncts teaching for no money at all. It could be on the level of graduate students preparing too much for the types of teaching assignments that they have. It could be on the level of pre-tenure assistant professors who are anxious about how their colleagues are going to judge their teaching and their research. But in all of those cases, I think the fact that we don't run on a kind of 40-hour per week schedule makes it entirely too easy to be exploited by a system that's trying to make money in an era when it's getting paid less and less from the state. And so I'll say that it's very difficult for me to keep to that 40 hours, but of course it is very important to try to articulate what you want to do within that time period, and I think it is important to try to keep to it as much as possible because it can quickly take over your life.
Yeah, if I could speak to that, when I first started grad school, I got some advice from somebody who had just finished grad school to treat your assistantship like a full-time job. So at least always plan to be in your office from 9 to 5 every day. And I tried that for a little while, and I found that I was very productive during those hours. But it just wasn't a system that worked for me. I'm not somebody who likes that sort of like 9 to 5, like everyday sort of schedule. Like the thing that I like about grad school and like academia in general is the schedule flexibility. And so that system doesn't really work for me anymore. But it is important to, as Roger was saying, like track your time, kind of like keep it in mind so that you know, like, okay, so I have spent, like 20 hours this week on X project and like 15 hours this week on Y project. And I've only got a few hours left, like allotted time that I'm getting like paid for. And it's important, I think, to not overdo it, like especially as a graduate student, like you don't get paid for those extra hours, and it's important to set limits for yourself. So keep track of your time, even if it's just for a couple of weeks, so that you can like get a sense of where your time is going. I did that, and it was really like eye-opening for me to see that, like, okay, well, I spend way too much time lesson planning, so I need to cut that back quite a bit. And I did, and it had really great effects on the rest of my work, I think. So
I think what's interesting, what you reminded me of was an E. Sedgwick quote where, and I can't remember it exactly, but at one point she said, I can't tell the difference between my work life and my non-work life. And she thought that this was a great thing. And I think that it can be a great thing. Like, it's kind of cool that I get to, read comics and watch movies and call that work. On the other hand, it's kind of horrifying because I can never get away from it. And so there's a way in which I feel like, even if it seems completely arbitrary and weird, that I erect barriers between these worlds that I inhabit. I think it's important. One strategy that I've always adopted when I was in grad school, I do it now, is that I try very much to form friendships with people who are either definitely not in my department, but probably not even in the university. And I think that because the university is kind of this all-encompassing world, and it's very easy to get caught up in sort of the day-to-day drama of it, and to go crazy slowly.
Yeah, I totally agree.
So I've always sort of tried to form friendships with people, and also because, like, in English, like, and especially when you're talking theory all the time, it's easy to become a total jerk and arrogant and elitist, right? Like, it's really easy to get caught up in that. And so I think it's really important to sort of remember that you're not just this person who's studying. You're a very complex individual with many different interests, and not all those interests have to be in your department or on campus. So just sort of trying to seek balance, and trying to find ways in which to understand that this isn't the only world that exists.
Yeah, that's totally important. I think I found quickly that immersing myself in all things English department was not healthy for me. And so I sought friends outside of the university system. And maybe wouldn't like recommend this route, but like I got a part-time job where I have like work friends who are not involved in the university at all. I play roller derby, and so like most of those people are like sometimes involved in the university, sometimes they're like from the surrounding areas, and it's really nice to just have hobbies and things to do that are not at all school related. But I also think that it's important when you're talking about this sort of thing to remind yourself, but also the people around you, that you're like a human being with limits, and you don't. You have to advocate for yourself a lot of the time in grad school, because I think that a lot of people, especially, no offense, professors, tend to forget that students are humans, right? And we've got a massive workload. So Roger doesn't really.
I do.
He does. He's pretty good about that. But yeah, so it's you have to. If your mentor asks you how you are and you're not good at all, tell them. They need to know that you are like falling behind and you might need some sort of like extension, or that you're dealing with a lot of like maybe like emotional stress or something like that, so that you can advocate for your mental health, but so that your mentor also knows what's happening with you.
I think another thing to be very, I think it's important to be a good listener. I mean, just in general, but especially in academia. One of the things that I've noticed recently, I've probably noticed it several times in my life, but I keep coming back to it. It's this idea that we don't do, academics don't, they're very good at talking about their own work, and doing it in such a way that um, people may or may not care what they're saying, and it wouldn't matter. Like, they just keep talking and talking and talking. And I think part of the reason for that is we're so used to working alone, and kind of being in our own little projects, and we want to share them, but we're not so good at listening to other people at the same time. And so it creates this weird kind of situation where everyone's just dying to share what they're doing, but doesn't necessarily want to listen to what the other person is doing. And so I think what's really important is to sort of take a step back and kind of realize that your project, probably a good project, but it may not change the world. That's totally cool. And to really cultivate a sense of listening to others and to what they're doing and to being interested in what they're doing. Okay, I'll do it.
Go ahead.
I think it's important to not see your mentor. I mean, I think it's important to cultivate a variety of relationships, mentoring relationships, and not just one. I think that's part of the way you can do it, so that if that mentoring relationship becomes in any way unhealthy, that you can appeal to other people. I think one of the things that's very problematic about the university system is that it is there can be all sorts of different ways in which mentors can take advantage of their students, and from sort of small things like getting recognition for their work to, I don't even know if that's small, but things that we know have happened at WSU campus, such as sexual assault and things of that nature. And so I think it's very important to not enable those types of relationships, but I think it's also important to be open to other relationships, so that you can make sure that others will have your back if something goes bad. So.
Yeah, and so there's that interpersonal sort of like emotional aspect of the mentor relationship that's really important to ensure that it stays healthy. And then I also think that there's the working aspect of it, to make sure that you're getting your work done and getting what you need out of your mentor relationship, is to ensure that you choose a mentor whose work style works with your own. So for example, Roger and I are both sort of bordering on type A personality. We're very step by step sort of get things done. And that is the kind of dynamic that works for us. I wouldn't work well with somebody who's really disorganized and kind of just free flowing, get your work to me whenever you feel like it, and because then I would just procrastinate. I wouldn't get anything done.
I would procrastinate, and I'd become very anxious and start yelling.
That's
not, and I don't want to yell. I don't want to be that guy.
Yeah. So I think it's important to find somebody who you vibe with.
First of all, I think the two most important things, I always say that and I feel kind of funny for saying that, but the two most important things are always to keep connected to the thing about the discipline or whatever that you're in that matters to you. Not to anyone you idealize, or not to a book that you've read, but something that matters about this field to you. And for me, it's always been I'm fascinated by stories. I'm fascinated by the people who tell them. I'm fascinated about who gets left out of stories. And that all that stuff really matters to me. And so maintaining a kind of connection to that is supremely important. I think the second thing to keep in mind is actually your career. And especially if you're in a humanities based field, it's very easy sometimes to sort of not worry about that, or to put your anxiety about it off to the future. To kind of, and I did this, by the way, like I didn't know what I was going to do when I finished college, and so I was like, grad school, right? And that's not a recipe for success, really. So keep in mind what you want to do with it, and keep in mind what's important to you. The other thing is that, yes, I am a huge advocate of maintaining relationships with all parts of the university system, making sure that everyone is visible. Not only because if you're talking about staff, you're talking about like secretaries, you're talking about people who work, uh, you know, cleaning our buildings. They quite literally can be the difference between your life being great and being crappy. Like, so it has a benefit for you, but then also, these are people, right? They exist. They're not, things to exploit or to use. They have lives of their own, and so it's always important to be connected to people who are around you in the communities that surround the university. So.
Yeah. So I think the other piece of advice that maybe we haven't gotten to yet, among the other things that we've pointed out, is to always be an advocate for yourself, because you are here for your own education. And while you might be really attracted to this person's work and their perhaps their research or something, if you find that you just don't get along with that person, then that's not a recipe for like long-term success in that like working relationship. But it's also really important when and this will happen a lot when you're asked to take on more responsibilities or more opportunities. Saying yes all the time is great, and it's like fun to have a lot of stuff going on, or to be like helping the department in some ways or things outside the department. But it's okay to say no. And I would even say that you should err on the side of no most of the time, because you need to focus on your own work. And this is, like I said, this is your education, and you're here for yourself to increase your educational goals and your career prospects. So keep those things in mind as you're working and taking new things on.
Definitely.